A rare find in Montana.
We've got bits of skull, teeth, backbone, leg, and ankle.
By researchers from Wisconsin.
Everybody erupted. Everyone was very excited.
A juvenile Tyrannosaurus rex.
There's maybe 3 or 4 in museums. They're that rare.
Now the program behind this historic dinosaur dig is in danger of going extinct.
I've had nightmares where I come back and the room is empty and nothing was ever done.
This week on Open Record,
When that money runs out, that's it.
the uncertain future of the bones in the basement. From the FOX6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Brian Polson, and I'm joined by Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
And we are joined by FOX6 News anchor, Ben Handelman. Hey, Ben, welcome back.
Second time on this podcast, long time listener.
And won't be the last time, we know that for sure. Well, I guess we'll see how this goes. No, I'm kidding. We are recording this episode on Wednesday, July 31st for release on Thursday, August 1st. And as we record, a group of paleontologists and students are wrapping up a month-long trek from Wisconsin to Montana in search of dinosaur bones. They are looking to complete a remarkable find that started in 2022, but as they dig, their future is in doubt, and we're going to dig into all of that right after this. So this starts in Kenosha, Wisconsin at the Carthage Institute of Paleontology. Ben, let's start there. First of all, what is that?
It is a section, a program that is in the basement of a very cool place in Kenosha called the Dinosaur Discovery Museum. And every time I go to Kenosha, when's the last time you guys actually went down to Kenosha and spent some time there?
I've been by this, and I'll see the trolleys in that area.
They've got
right?
first of all,
so you see
not that I'm working for Visit Kenosha or anything, but they have the trolley. They have a beautiful lakefront, and they've got these. I mean, a beautiful courthouse. We spend a lot of time there, sometimes on the news.
That's the place we're going. Right?
And smack dab in the center of Kenosha is this museum. Totally free. They ask for $5 donations if you want to come in, but it's a free museum. It's the Dinosaur Discovery Museum. And were you in the dinosaurs, Brian, as a child? Sarah?
It's funny, not as much as a lot of kids I know.
Kids now. We were just talking
never...
about that at my house last night, how it starts with kids love dinosaurs when they're little because it's the roar and they're cool looking. And then it kind of like morphs into liking sharks and more dangerous.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know why it's segmented.
And then you grow up and you like Ross on Friends.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, that's
a transition.
That's most of our connection to a paleontologist,
That's
right? Is
fair.
Ross on
Okay.
Friends.
And the Dinosaur Discovery Museum has this wow factor when you walk in. It's a very tiny museum, and we're going to bring on the executive director of the Kenosha Public Museums later in this podcast. But when you walk in, it's basically the upstairs room in the Dinosaur Discovery Museum. You walk in, and there's just these massive replications of the scariest dinosaurs you can think about. But what's cool is that the museum tells a story. And in this one giant room where they've got all these cool fossils and they're all replications of some of the most famous fossils in the world, it tells the story of how dinosaurs have evolved. They're not all from the same time, all the way to a bird. So it really gives you that connection
From
that
non-aviation flying
to what is around now. And so it's a story about evolution. They've got these huge things that kids, I'm sure their eyes bulge open when they go in there. So that is in the upstairs portion of the Dinosaur Discovery Museum. What is cool about this place is that there is actual science happening. And that happens with the Carthage, the Paleontology Institute. And that is down in the basement. And down there are actual real dinosaur bones.
And this isn't stuff where they're like, hey, Denver Museum, mail us some bones.
No.
And,
So
they've been doing it.
What's cool about this is every year or every 2 years, they'd like to go as much as possible. They go out and they do a dino dig. And they go out to a specific area that they've got some permits. It's on federal land out in southeastern Montana. And they collect whatever they find. And I found the whole process really fascinating because my knowledge of dinosaurs was Jurassic Park.
I was going to say Jurassic Park 1,
when
2,
I was
and 3.
8 years old, I loved dinosaurs, and I had lots of action figures. But to actually learn how the digs happen was a surprise for me, I think.
You want to know something I learned, by the way, because I have to do all this research to get myself up to speed on these things. And I was going to write a line in the open about this, Jurassic experience. And then I found out that actually these T-Rexes and bones and things that they're pulling up, they're not from the Jurassic era at all. It's the Cretaceous. Am I saying that right? We'll find out from our expert later.
Yeah. Don't quiz me on all the things that are in the Dinosaur Discovery Museum. But I will tell you this, that I assumed a dinosaur dig meant that these bones were found deep in the soil. But what's cool about this area in Montana, you are literally tripping over dinosaur fossils.
What?
They are on the surface.
That's wild. That's like every dream job. Like of a kid, it's like, we're going to go dig for stuff and uncover it and brush it. I just picture like little brushes and.
But if I understand what you're saying is these whatever rock layers or whatever fossil layers that existed billions of years ago or hundreds of millions of whatever it is, they're up at the surface.
They're up at the surface. And Dave Machuda, who's an editor for the story that we just did, that just recently aired on Fox 6, had a great visual of this. That basically 66 million years ago, a dinosaur dies, curls up in a ball. It's dead. It lays there. It gets buried in the soil. Millions of years pass by. It turns into a fossil, and we don't have to dig it up. Why? Because of the landscape out in Montana. There's rivers that are carving into the rock, and it's churning up the soil, and it's exposing these things from millions of years ago. So it's the perfect place to find dinosaur fossils, not just dinosaur fossils, which is what's cool about the Institute. They'll bring anything back from this time period on Earth. So we're talking plants, animals, but they're looking for dinosaurs. And so they go out every 2 years, and their last dig, which was, well, they just had a dig just now, but 2 years ago, the previous dig, they found something incredible that they didn't know. I mean, and
this is in the same area, like this paleontology playground, right?
Well, let me bring you back 2 years ago to their dig. So this small group, there's the man who leads this is called Thomas Carr, and he's a professor at Carthage, and he's the director of the Carthage Institute of Paleontology. So he goes out with a small group, dozen or so people, and literally, I mean, they go out and they try and find anything they can. You don't know what you're going to find. You don't know what kind of dinosaurs you're going to find. So literally, they had a pretty successful dig 2 years ago. Time's running out. They're scheduled to go from XYZ and they got to leave on this date. The second to last day, they decide, well, you know what? Let's go to an area we have never discovered or we've never looked at before, right? And the hike they're describing, they call it the Death March. They have to get on ATVs. You go as far as the ATV can go on public lands. You get off the ATV and then you're hiking in the middle of a Montana summer, which if you've ever, I mean, we're talking heat, bone dry.
Well, you're on the middle. I mean, it's like
it feels a little Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And it's the Badlands. So we're talking hills, extreme conditions to hike over. They've got rattlesnake guards on because there's rattlesnakes out there. And they've just decided, we've never been to this area before. Let's all just kind of spread out and we're just going to see what's here on the second to last day.
What I thought there was snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? Anyway, go on.
On the second to last day, someone on the group named Mason goes, hey, I found something. Not uncommon for the group. And he goes, what did you find? He goes, I don't know. And they did something called tag it and bag it. Okay, I know I found dinosaur bones. I don't know what they are. They're pieces of a fossil. I'm going to tag it, throw it in a bag. We'll look at it later. So they do that. You collect everything in that area. They notice Mason was there for a long time, meaning he got a bunch of stuff. Goes back with literally a bucket of bones. And they go back. It's their last night in Montana before they have to come back to Kenosha.
Are they looking at things that evening, or do they wait until they get back to Kenosha?
No, they'll look that evening.
Okay.
And especially Dr. Carr, being the expert of the group, is going to say, okay, let's look through your rock. They know they have something.
They've found bones before. Like they
find bones every time they go out.
Right?
They've been successful every single year. It sounds like it's just a graveyard of dinosaur bones. If you know what you're looking for, me and you would probably like that looks like dirt. But for them, I
can't put together a 100-piece puzzle. So I mean, it's remarkable to me. But anyway,
So they're taking the bones out, and everyone in the group knew that something special had just occurred because Dr. Carr suddenly becomes very silent. Which
as he's looking through the
as they're looking through,
okay,
and they see his facial expression and they know we've just found something very special. Now this is very interesting. Thomas Carr is an expert in the growth of Tyrannosaurus rexes. So this is what he
amazing.
studies. But you cannot go out and say, you know what, I'm an expert in T-Rexes. Let's find some T-Rexes. You just find what you find, right? Whether it be in a cow or all these other kind of dinosaurs. So what he pulls out of this bag is pieces of a juvenile T-Rex. Extremely rare. And Brian, I know you've been looking into how extremely rare it is. There are only 3 or 4 of these good fossils, somewhat full, in the entire world in museums.
What I found so fascinating about this, I never had thought about it when you talk about the growth of a T-Rex. I just sort of assume they've got all kinds of fossils of T-Rexes of all ages and they've been compared, but they don't.
Right.
And so every time one of these is discovered that's at a different stage of life, they get a better picture of the growth and development of the Tyrannosaurus Rex and obviously of other dinosaurs. And in this case, you said it's a junior or a juvenile.
Juvenile, yeah. I think they think it's somewhere in the 7 to 13. Don't quote me on this. But so not a baby. But I'm going to also assume when the T-Rexes get bigger, the bones are huge and they're easier to find.
I mean,
so when you've got a juvenile.
But what's interesting to me is Dr. Carr, he didn't discover, but he identified years before that, I think it was around 2006, identified a baby T-Rex that was discovered in the same area, I believe, in Montana. This 3-year-old that if you go to the Kenosha Dinosaur Discovery Museum, you'll see the story of little Clint. He's the 3-year-old, baby dino, the baby T-Rex. So now you've got the baby T-Rex, and now he's got this juvenile, and I think is it Chicago maybe that has the adult, the big one, Sue?
Sue's the big one, and that's famous.
And that's where I went and I got this picture. I don't know. I know if you're listening to audio, it does nothing for you, but if you're watching on video, let me see right. So the big ones there, like your adult T-Rexes, and then the little blue one there, down this little one down here that's Jane, who is actually I think another junior or juvenile type T-Rex, who is in like 50% of the bones are in Rockford at, I think it's like the Burpee Museum of Natural History. So that was discovered in 2001, and I think there's some controversy if that was even a T-Rex. Like that might have been another similar species but different, and I think more recently they determined nope, it is a juvenile T-Rex. Now you've got a new one. And you start to connect the dots between the baby and then the younger juvenile, and the older juvenile, and the adult. I have to imagine for these paleontologists, this is just huge.
And what's so exciting about this find is obviously you want to get the entire fossil. You want the entire dinosaur.
Yeah, they just had pieces, right?
And so what they found, again, I'm going to take you back. This is the second to last day. And on the last night before the next day, they have to pack everything up and leave. So they find this incredible thing.
Oh, gosh.
And they can't make that hike back out because they got to go. Like their funding is out for the year and everybody's got things to do and got to go back home. But they found a shin bone. I think they found a tooth. They found all these different pieces. But what's exciting about it is some of the bones were bleached by the sun, but part of what they found was dark, which means it was underground, which to them indicates that maybe there's more of this thing underneath the ground. And we got to go back and we are going to dig and find out what is in this area because they know the location. When you have the bag, you've got the exact location of where this thing was found. And so that's what they did this summer. And I don't actually know the results of what happened. They've just
been out there for the last month, right?
Been out there for the last month.
So this is this really exciting time for the Carthage Institute of Paleontology. And at the same time, it's a very troubling time for the Carthage Institute of Paleontology. And we're going to talk about why that is when we come right back. So the Carthage Institute of Paleontology is this partnership between Carthage College and the city of Kenosha, housed at the Dinosaur Discovery Museum. And they've just made this incredible discovery a couple of years ago of some junior T-Rex bones. And they're about to go back and go in search of the rest of this junior T-Rex. But as that's happening, funding for this whole program, or at least a significant part of the program, is drying up. Is that right? Tell us a little bit about that, Ben.
This program's been around since 2006, the partnership between the city and the Carthage Institute of Paleontology. And this is arguably their most exciting find ever. And as soon as they make this find, they're now afraid that the entire program is going to go extinct. So what is unique about this program, it's very small. I mean, it's what's great about Carthage, too. So these are small programs, really hands-on. But there's only 2 positions really in the entire institute.
Dr. Carr, obviously.
Dr. Carr's the director, and then they have a position called the preparator. Someone was called Megan Seitz was the preparator. And what the preparator does is she or he takes the bones back, you catalog them, and you make them so they can be keep them forever. You put these things in field jackets when you're out in Montana, and you bring them back to Kenosha or your museum, and now you need someone to kind of uncover all of that. And so what the preparator does with the Institute helps train students and volunteers. I mean, you could be a volunteer from the community, go in and work with dinosaur bones, which is what's so cool about the Dinosaur Discovery Museum and this partnership. But the problem is 4 years ago, Carthage had to go some cuts to keep the school afloat.
This was like COVID hit and everybody's struggling.
And obviously numbers are down, especially hitting, we've covered this, especially small private institutions. They've been hit really hard by this. And they made cuts throughout the entire college. And one of the positions that was cut was the preparator position. Now, luckily for them, there was some grants that had come through and was able to keep that position afloat for the last 4 years. It's not the most expensive position. Actually, the salary is less than $40,000 a year in terms of salaries. So they've been able to do that. The problem is those funds run out August 2024.
And are there other grants that they're still applying for and trying to bring this thing back? Is that a possibility? Are those funds drying up? What's going on there?
So my understanding is, yes, they obviously been both the Institute as well as Carthage tells me they've been trying to get a new grant to cover this. And my understanding is, obviously there's a lot of competition in the world of grants, right? And my understanding is a lot of grants will no longer fund salaried positions. We'll give you money for X, Y, and Z. Maybe you have a specific thing that you're doing, but we're not just going to keep a position afloat for some of these private grants. And that's what happened with the grant that kept them afloat. Like, it's no longer doing salaried positions. And so Dr. Carr, very upset by this, says without the preparator, he can't go and do dino digs anymore because he needs someone to do everything that when all these bones come back. And on top of that, he fears that the federal government's going to come in and actually confiscate their entire collection. And they have more than 100,000 fossils in their collection. And the reason is because they collect these bones on federal land, you need someone who can take care of them. And that's what the preparator does with their museum, with their institute. So without that position, he says this entire collection is now at risk of one day the government saying, oh, they're not being cared for down in Kenosha. Let's move them to, I don't know, a different museum. Let's move them to a field museum.
Are they essentially the property of the federal government because of that? Okay.
Yes.
There
really are bones. It's on federal land, and because of the way the contracts are written, that it's the public's. So, which is what's interesting about Sue down at the Field Museum, that T-Rex that's so famous. She was found. I say she. I think it's a she dinosaur. It is Sue the T-Rex. So. On private land, and there's a big fight over it, and there's been documentaries over.
Although you got me thinking Johnny Cash now. There is a boy named Sue. We don't know. It could be. But anyway.
Well, when you went to go interview Dr. Carr, you actually were there on the preparator's last day.
Right.
And so talking to her was probably interesting too. Yeah.
And devastating for her. She's been with the Institute for over a decade.
Yeah.
And that's been, she knows those bones like they're her children, these fossils are her children. And yes, so she, at the end of the road finally came. It looked pretty clear that there was not going to be funding. And so she started looking for other jobs, and she landed a job at a small museum out in Colorado, in Grand Junction. And literally when we went down to interview her, it was her final day in Kenosha. So she had to do what she had to do, and she did not go on the dino dig this year because she was starting a new job. Yeah. So they brought other people in to help with the dino
dig. She did say too, she's hopeful for her colleagues that, something can get worked out. She didn't just go, well, see you guys, best of luck. She really is hopeful that something will be worked out.
Right. And Thomas Carr is very hurt by this. He says that both Carthage has turned their backs and the city of Kenosha, because it's a partnership, really, that museum, the Dinosaur Discovery Man. It's a partnership.
So he's not mincing words. He's got feelings about that.
He's very heated about this, and you can understand why, because he feels the whole thing's at risk, and they can't go and do what they've been doing for the last 20 years, almost 20 years. So
I do wonder, obviously this is something he's very close to. He's going to be very emotional about it. Is there any chance that he's maybe over concerned here about what may happen? I mean, are we really at risk? And maybe we'll find out from our expert we're going to talk to from the city of Kenosha. But is there really a risk that someone's going to come in and confiscate all these bones?
That's why I'm excited to talk to the executive director of the Kenosha Public Museums, because what is at stake here? I think that's the one voice that was missing from our story. It's clear that nobody's going to kick the door down tomorrow and take all the collection downstairs. And as the public, they may not notice right away, because these are really programs. It's behind closed doors. They don't just let people walk in and like pick up whatever they want off the shelves, but it is part of their educational programs. So I don't know that there's precedent of this happening in other places, and I'm sure the federal government doesn't have the kind of resources to just be moving entire collections to, and other museums probably don't have the kind of resources to take on 100,000 new fossils. So that would be the last resort.
Well, and so Dr. Carr, I mean, we talked about if the preparator, that position is leaving, being, it's done. And Dr. Carr obviously has a specialized area. And so just for people that are like, well, can't Dr. Carr just do the preparator's job? That's not how it works either.
Well, no, because he's got a full-time job at Carthage too.
Right.
And he's a professor of biology. So he's teaching at Carthage. There's other things with the program, and what was happening in the basement of the Dinosaur Discovery Museum really is a full-time job, because you're training a lot of volunteers, you're doing some of the educational programming, and you're training students. And they do have a very successful program at Carthage, albeit small. It has grown the last few years. They have over a dozen students there now.
Well, that makes me wonder, though, could they carry this on with students? Is there enough there, or is there a missing link without that preparator?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a question with Carthage. You just can't have students who've never been trained. Yeah. They wouldn't know what to do.
Are they the ones going on the digs? So you said there's a group of like 10 to 12, but obviously with Dr. Carr going, who are the other?
I think it's students, former students, and then he also has friends in the field.
Yeah.
I think that are definitely helping him this year.
Anyone with a hat and a whip? No? No? All right. No, that's a whole different kind of digging. All right. Anyway, I think it's a good time for us to bring our guest in, because she's probably sitting and listening to this and going, I have all kinds of things to say, and we're going to hear from our guest. We will come back. The director of Kenosha Public Museums, Peggy Grigorski, will join us when we're right back. The director of Kenosha Public Museums, Peggy Grigorski, joins us now on Open Record. Peggy, thank you for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So you've been listening for the last 20 minutes as we've gabbed on, and I'm sure you've had thoughts about things, but tell us, first of all, a little bit about if there's anything you've heard and you've wanted to jump in on and wanted to say, what's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I appreciate your passion for the Dinosaur Discovery Museum and the CIP. It has been truly a great, great story for our community, for the museum, for Carthage, and a really unique, not ever done before, museum / research / school kind of experience. There really isn't another program in the country that I'm aware of that really takes you from, digging the dinosaurs out in the field to learning how to take care of them, preserve them, conserve them, study them, make sense of what you're studying, compare that to other research, and then talk about how you interpret that knowledge and present it to the public in a museum setting. It's really, really unique. And that breadth of experience, that kind of circle of life, if you will, is what was so unique, or is so unique, about the Carthage Dinosaur Discovery Museum partnership. And it's been great over the years. If you can imagine the original agreement that we have with Carthage, which we're currently operating under, is, you're right, between the city and between Carthage. It dates back to 2006 and actually was kind of the conceptual document that brought this whole idea to fruition. So it's vague in some aspects, in that we didn't really know what we were imagining. Like, what could this really be? This is the idea. And now we're like 18 years later, and obviously things have changed, and lots of great discoveries, lots of great research, incredible passion and effort and success. The Dinosaur Discovery Museum itself has had great success. So it makes sense to me in one way that we really do need to look at the agreement. Financially, things have changed for the city, for the museum, for the college. Staff has changed now, students come and go. So all of that, it just makes sense that we renegotiate and kind of reimagine what the future can be like in a way that's sustainable, responsible, and effectual. It's certainly a mission that we're committed to. The college is committed to it. The city's committed to it. And certainly our museums are committed to it. It's really just figuring out the next steps. And Dr. Carr is right. The finances are a huge piece of that. He's right, too, in that it is more than a one-man show. It will take, it really does take a full-time person, Megan's position, the preparator, to be there on a daily basis to work with the thousands of fossils that they've brought back. And you really can't underscore enough the relationship between the preparator and teaching those students and training them. And it's really the bridge between the academic intellectual research, which is Dr. Carr's specialty, and the hands-on, what I call really low-tech, cleaning the bones with those brushes. And it looks to me like toothpicks and toothbrushes and, the hands-on. I'd be whacking at it with a hammer and I'd break something, and it's again, that bringing the story again full circle and making that connection between, again, the academic and the practical application of that knowledge. So it is a vital piece of it.
Do you agree with Dr. Carr when he says that the entire collection is at risk of being confiscated by the federal government and moved elsewhere?
Well, the advantage we have with the Kenosha Public Museums is, you may know this, we have 3 museums that are part of our museum family, if you will: the Kenosha Public Museum, the Civil War Museum, and the Dinosaur Discovery Museum. We operate as a department of the city of Kenosha. We have 48 people on staff, 20 full-time staff. One of our positions is a curator of collections. And so we actually would be able to protect the conservation, the preservation, I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but be able to serve as the protector, if you will, for that collection, because we do have a qualified curator of collections on staff. We would not have a person who could act like a preparator. A full-time position would actually be able to work with those bones.
So it means, if I'm hearing that right, you could preserve what you already have, you could protect what you already have, but in terms of the new bones coming in, the work that needs to be done to prepare those for preservation, you wouldn't be able to continue doing that?
That's correct.
What I think is interesting about the Dinosaur Discovery Museum and what makes it so special, you've got this upstairs room that tells the story, but then downstairs, the science is really in action. Is that possible that that's all going to go away and we're going to kind of lose what's so special about the Dinosaur Discovery Museum?
It wouldn't all go away. There would be other ways to have that hands-on kind of learning. We do have an educator with the Dinosaur Discovery Museum that's a museum staff person who might be able to do some things with the collection. And we'd have to separate what is truly the T-Rex research, let's call it the AAA level of dinosaur bones that only Dr. Carr and that work's going to be done on one level. There's all those other, 99,000 fossils and bones that they have brought back that could be worked on by less skilled people. But it's really all still up in the air. So what I and the Dean of the Natural Sciences Division at Carthage met in May. And we are scheduled to talk again in August, now that the dig is over and everybody's back in place. When this all kind of came to a head, I'll say like towards the end of May, the beginning of June, commencement was just happening. There was, kind of the switch between the academic year and the summer. And then Dr. Carr was getting ready for the field school. So Deanna Burns is who I've been working with the college to open up the conversation now as we move into late summer, early fall, and talk about what the next steps might be. And you accurately reported, Carthage is still actively looking for grants to help fund the position. The museum, the position is Carthage's, and so the museum and the city aren't in a position to raise money for that, but we certainly are in a position to demonstrate the partnership that we have with the college in order to make stronger proposals to funders or grantors.
Peggy, if I could ask, because you said something earlier about, time, maybe it's the time has come to sort of renegotiate that partnership. What is that the key here? Is this really something between the city and Carthage College in terms of what the future of this is going to look like? When you said that, I guess I wasn't quite clear what you mean, but help me understand a little bit more about what you mean by that sort of renegotiation.
Yeah, exactly. It's really a way to the need to detail the agreement to a further level. So, you know, I can't even say what the details might be because we haven't talked about it to that degree yet. But our commitment to being able to continue the research, the commitment to be able to have somebody or some people who could work on the fossils and bones on a regular basis, the opportunity for volunteerism and public input into that educational experience, that conservation experience, the opportunities for public education in general regarding paleontology and dinosaurs and the whole experience. So there's kind of all of these levels now that we know better what we have, what the potential is. And those are the positives. The negatives are the funding. Do we all have the resources available to do this to make it sustainable? And all of that has to kind of get thrown into the pot to talk about what the future will be. But the good news is that everybody is interested in the future of this partnership and wants it to continue. It's retooling it for the future again. So it's not.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I actually kind of wonder after Ben does this story, did that generate discussion among people going, hey, what can we do? Are you hearing from anyone saying we want to save this? We want to, or what kind of reaction are you hearing to that story?
I'm sure they're still thinking about it and they're getting ready to call today, probably. So we haven't heard from anybody yet, but there is no doubt that the more you talk about something and the more that it is in the public, and Dr. Carr's been a great advocate for the program. He has gone above and beyond to talk about the program and the issues related to it wherever he can.
This is emotional for him. I mean, he's talked about, he didn't, and not just him, everyone who's really close to this institute, but he didn't mince his words. He said that the city of Kenosha and Carthage have turned their backs on this program because they're not living up to that original agreement. He also said the city used to provide U-Haul trucks to help bring the bones back, and they don't do that anymore. But I'm sure you guys aren't swimming in money either. How tough is it for small museums in communities these days?
It's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult. True. This was the first year we weren't able to provide the U-Haul back. It is very, very challenging. We used to send a staff person who would go out there for all 4 weeks of the dig. We can't afford that staff person to be away from the museums that length of time anymore. So then a staff person would just go out for the week and literally drive out there to pick up the dinosaur bones and drive them back. That has become prohibitive because we have, again, things going on at the Dinosaur Museum and our other 2 museums. Our staff works for all 3 of the museums, not just one. So, and I guess that's what I mean about reimagining it. So the resources that we had 20 years ago, we don't have today. But so how can we be smarter about this? How can we prioritize the activities, the things that we want to happen with the resources that we have? And then how do we identify new resources?
Okay, I've got it. You need a dino drone. It flies out. It brings the bones back and forth. No? Well, anyway, it seems like something.
Let's call Amazon on this.
One day.
Right.
Well,
and
the Dr. Carr finds some pretty big stuff out there, though.
You
might need a bigger one.
Triceratops skull would be tough.
Oh my
gosh!
gosh.
But we'll work on it.
Peggy, obviously, you're so passionate about the museums in Kenosha. And so can you just talk a little bit about why it's just so important to keep these museums thriving and, in use for people to come in an era where you can go on the internet and Google dinosaur fossil pictures? Why is it important to keep these museums going?
Because we have the real stuff. The actual artifacts and specimens, from whether it's millions of years ago and it's a dinosaur bone, whether it's a letter that was written by a soldier in the Civil War, whether it's moccasins made by Native Americans several thousand years ago. When you can tell the stories based on something that you actually can see and feel and touch, something that has been created by humans, something that was once alive on our earth, and tell the story about that makes that knowledge real. It just sinks in, and it is so much different than book learning. It supports book learning. It certainly supports classroom learning. But in this day and age, when there's so many ways to learn, being able to have the real thing is critical. It makes every other experience pale by comparison.
That's such a powerful thing. I was thinking about people who will pay all kinds of money for a little piece of the original Star Wars set that was filmed 50 years ago. And it's like an absolute icon of history in my hand. And you go, no. We have a bone from 66 million years ago.
And on that note, I will
right
say
here.
we just in our news had there was a fossil that just sold, I think, for $144 million of not of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but of some other. There's some rich people out there who will pay a lot of money for this kind of stuff. What's so amazes me, Peggy, and learning this, you were all in this one room as a museum just back in 2006, not that long ago in history. The Dinosaur Discovery Museum was only created really in 2006. Everything was in this one, which is a very cool room, but it's just amazing that how you guys have grown over the years.
So the Kenosha Public Museum was originally in that building. The building that you were in, Ben, actually was originally a post office in Kenosha. And during the Depression, as a WPA project, they actually put that building up on rollers, moved it west 2 blocks so that they could build the new post office. And then the city of Kenosha was committed to turning this into a cultural venue for the city. And at that point, they didn't really know what it would be, but they saved the building for that purpose. And it actually took 2 years to do the move. It's only a 10,000 square foot building, but it was a very good upcycle as far as we're concerned, from turning it from a post office to for initially the Kenosha Public Museum, which was we're a natural history and fine and decorative arts museum.
And now a world-class research institute, as you're getting maybe something
Absolutely.
that
So
is very few places in the world with juvenile T-Rex fossils.
Yeah. The Art and Natural History Museum moved over to the lakefront when we redeveloped the lakefront as part of the when Chrysler closed down. And then we had a lot of property here along the lakefront to develop. We opened the Civil War Museum right after we opened the Dinosaur Discovery Museum. So the new place for the Kenosha Public Museum was 2001. The Dinosaur Museum opened in 2006 in our old building. And then we opened the third museum in 2008, the Civil War Museum, which creates this family of museums that is kind of a synergy. It creates an economy of scale, if you will, where we can have one staff operating it as one city department. About 60% of our funding comes from the city of Kenosha, and the other 40% we have to raise, whether it's through philanthropy, grants, our gift shops, running classes, renting out the building for weddings, whatever it might be. We augment the portion of the tax levy that we get. So it's a small pie that gets divvied up a lot of different ways. So our struggles with finance are nearly the same as the Carthage Institute of Paleontology.
I'll say this, Peggy. Just listening to you talk, you're clearly very passionate about this. We're so grateful that you've spent the time here with us on Open Record, because I think it's answered a lot of questions I never would have even thought of with regard to these public museums. So thank you for spending the time with us here on Open Record.
My pleasure. Anytime, I'll be happy to come back.
Peggy Grigorski, Executive Director of Kenosha Public Museums. We are going to take a break and go off the record when we come back right after this. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question for which we have done absolutely no preparation except for this person.
But I've got this Post-it.
Yeah. Sarah.
A little Post-it. Let me just say that we are recording this in the afternoon for the first time in a while, because Ben was so gracious to come in, and he's a night shift guy. Normally I smell your coffee at 9 a.m, and now I'm smelling your coffee at 2 p.m, and I'm really confused.
You know, I
can't believe you're drinking coffee right now.
It's my second cup, and the funny thing is, and I know maybe this sounds like a little bit of like the coffee addict kind of thing, but I feel like I'm coming on the podcast. I need a cup of coffee.
You need it. You need a little bit.
So I don't normally drink an afternoon cup.
It should be iced
but I
coffee
am
today too.
Well,
the day
yeah.
we're recording this, it's like 92 degrees outside. 72
It kind of
point.
is by accident because I made this before I was logging video in my office about an hour before the podcast.
Gross.
And
Now
it's
it's
just
on the cooler side.
It's sort of a cold coffee. Yeah.
Well, we're not talking about food or drink today, so shocker. Okay, so the Olympics are happening right now in Paris.
Ooh.
The gold medal has a small sliver, like a little piece of iron, from the Eiffel Tower in it. So if the Olympics were held in Wisconsin, what should the gold medal include?
Ooh.
I mean, I have thoughts, but then I go, do I have to be like safe, right? I can't.
No, yeah.
Can I
yeah.
just say this segment terrifies me each and every time? Every time I get nervous and I'm like, oh, geesh, I don't know.
I mean, the obvious answer was it would have to have some sort of cheese or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cheese doesn't stay. You want a stinky metal?
What if we just made it the Milwaukee flag? That terrible flag that has been
not
voted.
the people's flag.
No,
but
the
old-
actual official city flag in Milwaukee, which has been voted the worst flag in the
the one
world.
that, the
Oh,
one that
man.
actual vexillologists
Yeah, let's do that.
hate, right?
Yes.
The
I'm
world
on
is
board with the
watching.
Vex. I think it's terrible. It's just like kitchen sink of
You
flags.
never thought this question was going to lead to dissing the Milwaukee flag. That's
That's all the
might
time
be-
we have today.
That might be the quickest and farthest we've gone off the rails. How about the flag? Anyway, let's talk about that. I don't know, like, I mean, what would
Well,
be
what would
like
you
a
put in
permanent
it?
material
Like, it's
from
yeah.
Wisconsin?
Right.
That would
like
be
Paris had it easy, right? Like, yeah, of course it's going to be the Eiffel Tower.
Well, what
What's
about
our
the art museum?
obvious?
because I mean, it can't
The
be
art
like
museum?
like musky bone. I don't know.
I think
Oh,
our
a
obvious would be
sturgeon?
some
Yeah.
sort of Lake Michigan reference. Kind of like, not to go back to the flags, but
deep
the people's
tunnel.
flag is kind of, ooh,
It's just a slice of the deep tunnel
little
right in the
pieces
middle.
of it.
I hope you're talking about like the walls of the deep tunnel and not
Not the
contents,
interiors. Okay, fine.
Because
yes.
talk about a stinky metal.
Is it a piece of metal that's on the
Yes.
gold?
It's like a
medals?
small sliver. It's a piece of iron from the Eiffel Tower, which I have a lot of questions about. Like,
Yeah, would they
how
just
did
chunked
one-
it off, or
Did you
like-
just?
Yeah.
Would it
I
be
don't know.
like would it be? Would we use a piece of the Calatrava?
Maybe yeah, that's what I'm
The art-
saying.
yeah.
Like the art museum. That they also called the Calatrava.
I
you
would
said-
put
oh, you said
a
art
little.
museum?
I knew what I meant.
I'd put a little glass bubble and put a little dot of Lake Michigan water in each and
Ooh,
every gold medal.
I like your
Oh,
thinking.
it looks like it's got
Oh,
the
like
little,
yes.
yeah.
It's not the East Coast. It's
Almost
not
like a
the West
snow
Coast.
globe.
It is the fresh coast.
Yeah.
That is the best coast.
Unsalted. Hashtag.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so fresh water
Yeah.
in the gold medal. That's actually
Okay.
that's a good
That's
one.
a great idea, Ben. Okay.
But apparently you can use water and not cheese, so mine was terrible.
But that water is gonna stay. Maybe it'll dry up, but your cheese will stink, as will my deep tunnel.
If it's contained. No?
Hmm.
Moldy
No,
cheese? I mean, cheese is already kind of mold, right? Really?
Unless it's blue.
technically.
Are we going to
Cheese?
get bigger events now? We're never going to get an Olympics in Milwaukee, but now that the RNC has passed, are we
right.
going to get some? You know what cracks me up is the mayor. What he's really pushing for, I think, has been underreported, is a massive WWE event. And I thought it was fitting that Hulk Hogan was here for the RNC, and part of me was wondering if the mayor was. Because, which also cracked me up that the Democratic mayor was here, like working the behind the
Courting them,
scenes inside Pfizer
Yeah.
Forum during the RNC when he's literally going on every media saying, don't vote for these people, which I thought was a weird juxtaposition. But when Hulk Hogan was there, I was like, I wonder if the mayor is going to try and get some inroads
Like,
with some
hey,
WWE.
turn
How
this
do you
into
feel about
like a-
Milwaukee?
Yeah, like
'Cause-
some sort of a promotion of the next.
Like those
thing.
WrestleMania events are as
Huge.
much, they're as big as Super Bowls. Like, could Milwaukee get one of those?
Well, they could do it at AmFam Field.
yeah.
They do them in large arenas like that.
Would we have enough hotels, though? It's always the question.
We just hosted the RNC.
See, that's what I'm saying. I don't
Shoot.
know. We ain't getting Olympics.
We've had the
out of that.
NBA championship. You know, we've had the RNC. I mean, there's all sorts of things I think we could have.
Do you remember when Chicago wanted to get the Olympics? I was actually, this was a long time ago. I think I was overseas at the time, and everyone, I think London was the one who ended up with it. Everyone else in the world knew Chicago was not going to get it. But at the time, I thought they said some of the events might be in Milwaukee.
I
could see
feel like
that. could see
I
that.
remember
Like
that
I could
too.
see them using the
It's a long
pettit
time
maybe
ago.
for some like speed skating or something, right?
Oh,
Oh, well, there's not enough seating, though.
yeah.
Well, maybe that's true. Okay,
Huh.
that's fair.
My other thought, this
Really
is
poke some holes
we're
in it.
really going down a weird path here, but did you like the swimming inside a giant arena down at Indianapolis? Did you see that?
Oh,
They had the
Yes.
USA swimming trials, the people to determine who's going to go to the Olympics, inside the Colts Stadium. They put an Olympic-sized swimming pool there, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I'm like, this is the future of the Olympics. We're not going to build like Olympic
Actual.
swimming centers anymore. We're just going to put giant pools in stadiums you already got.
what do they do with all that water? Okay, Dave was wrapping us. He
Oh,
gave
he's
us.
saying
he gave
yeah,
us this
that's
one.
enough of your chitter
He said,
chatter
"Please stop
here.
talking."
Okay, all right, fine. We're
Getting
gonna take a break, and when we come back, we'll wrap things up right after this.
The FOX6 investigators, Milwaukee's most experienced investigative team. Honored, trusted, respected.
It's not just about telling a story,
It's about making positive change in our community.
holding the powerful accountable
You're just a piece of
by helping the powerless.
And exposing what you have a right to know.
Not really sure why no one wants to talk about it.
The FOX6 investigators.
We are Milwaukee's investigative team.
Because you matter.
All right, that's all the time we have this week. If you have a topic you would like us to discuss on Open Record or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send us an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. As always, thank you to the people who make this podcast possible, including our executive producer, Sarah Smith, our special guest today, Ben Handelman.
I'd go on
Thank
a
you,
dino
Ben.
dig with both of you guys.
There you go.
Same,
Our
same.
editor, Dave Machuda, who is also our video switcher today, and our chief photographer, who is not here, Cale Zimney. With that, I'm Brian Polson. We'll be back next week.